My name is Toney Coleman, and in this session, we're going to talk about attracting bidders and DBE participation for airport projects. I really like to know who I have in the audience, and being from Fayetteville, North Carolina, home of the 82nd Airborne and Special Operations Forces, I like to know if I have any kindred spirits in the house. So if you've ever served in the military in any capacity, whether it's active duty or reserves, would you please stand? Okay. Continue standing. If you are a spouse or a child of anybody who served in the military, please stand. Okay, I'm in good company. You can go ahead and sit down now. I am in good company. The panelists that I have with me today include Wilfred Nixon of Weeden and Associates Incorporated. If you raise your hand. Joseph Conway, Director of Health, Equity, Human Experience, and Interpreter Services from the new Hanover Regional Medical Center. And we'll be bringing online with us Mr. Simeon. He's the Vice President of Diversity Affairs at Austin Industries. You will find a detailed bios of those persons in the conference app. You really want to use it. It works fine. It keeps me from having to carry a bunch of paper around with me. The format for this session will be open discussion between all of the panelists here and you. Then we'll close with a short PowerPoint presentation by Wilfred Nixon. Now, the one thing that I really need you to do is engage with us. We need your expertise as much as we need to hear from the people that are on the panel. Okay, so let's go ahead and set the stage for today's discussion about attracting bidders and DBE participation for airport projects. Prior to 2020 at the Fayetteville Regional Airport, we developed project specifications. The project designers, the architect, and the engineer looked at the licensure requirements. We solicited for bids, and we had a formal bid. It was about $53 million. We received the bids, we opened the bids, we evaluated the bids, determined the successful bidder, awarded the contract, and then executed the contract. And what happened? The pandemic happened. So I guess the first question that I want to ask the panel or anyone in the audience is, what guidance or insight can you share with the audience today about attracting bidders in this new environment? Anybody who wants to take that can feel free to take it. And if there's someone in the audience that would like to address that question, feel free to do that as well. We thought about having a microphone to pass around, and I said that might not be good going from mouth to mouth. So we got rid of that. But if you are out there and you want to have something to say, just say it out loud. Yes, ma'am.
How about if we have somebody with a really big mouth? That's all.
No, Lisa, not at all.
Have you considered having forums where you can invite people to come and talk about the bidding contract ahead of the actual bidding contract, so that you can really educate them and try to get invested in the process?
And her question, just in case you didn't hear it, was what about the probability or possibility of inviting folks to a forum where you talk to them about the bidding process? And I can tell you at the Fayetteville Regional Airport, that is exactly what we did. We had multiple times where we brought in the bidders to talk to them about that process, because not everybody knows those steps.
I'll
Go ahead,
comment.
sir.
I mean, you said the pandemic, and I'm healthcare predominantly. So I will say, from my unique standpoint, probably one of the main reasons that I'm here is I was actively involved with our Wilmington Chamber of Commerce. I also am a Lean Six Sigma black belt, as well as involved in the bidding process for our own organization. And one of the things that we initiated throughout the pandemic is we actually do have a force that very similar to what you just commented on, But instead of calling a group of people, we send our representatives out by the ones. So we do side-by-sides with a lot of these folks that would potentially bid or companies, and we walk them through the process. Many times, businesses are not as familiar with the intricacies of corporations and how to bid on contracts, what the requirements are. In our industry, of course, you all know licensure as well as insurance when you walk onto our campus. So I think all of these types of things are extremely important for folks to get their minds around. And then second, I would also comment on this. We challenge any bidder to also think about the opportunities in that second and third tier, right? How do we get opportunities for folks that want to get experience in the industry or experience on a particular project, but they may not have everything that they need? So how do we use second and third tier within said contract or within a bidding process to entice them to bring on, say, more minority businesses that are out there, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, black-owned businesses, Latino-owned businesses, and so on and so forth?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I would say you may want to add more time to your bidding process. I'm saying airports having to bid projects, 1, 2, or 3 times because they're not getting enough bidders. Right. So you may want to add time to your process. Also, if it's a DBE gold project, then you want to also look at if that bidder does not make the gold percentage, then you need to add time for the good faith effort review in your bidding process also. And also be aware of your processes and make sure your bid specs are up to date with those DBE requirements.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Hey, Tony, I'd like to chime in.
And where's that coming from? Okay, go ahead.
First, let me say I apologize for not being able to be there. Last minute family situation, but I'm glad I'm able to at least lock in. So I'm coming from the general contractor perspective and working with the airport, as the airport being our client, and those initiatives, inclusion initiatives of DBE, MBE, or whatever inclusion elements you may have are falling upon them. So for our approach, number one is that for us as a company, it's a policy of inclusion. It has been, I've been with the company 21 years. It was in place before that of DBE, MBE inclusion across the board. So we do it regardless of whether there's goals or not. For us, what has made a big part of our success has been the ongoing relationships. And I think that's key. I think the thing about it is we tend to, as a whole in the industry, do outreach events and host different initiatives when there's an RFP on the street. The key to that is getting ahead of that and having a relationship of DB firms that you, again, for us as a contractor, we're well aware of, that we've worked with, we've got relationships with. So when RFP does hit the street, we're not scrambling. It's just part of our normal bidding process. We host, last year because of the pandemic, we had to do it virtually. But typically we'll have at our corporate office, which is in Dallas, and then our various regional offices, what we call our inclusion or diversity open house. And that's where anywhere from 200 to 300 diverse businesses come and meet the decision makers in our company, from our CEO, presidents, vice presidents, project management, pre-construction team, all of those that are overseeing contracts or can execute contracts. And we start developing relationships long before the proposal or various proposals are on the street. And then doing the next step is those prime contractors, non-diverse, that we have a lot of interaction with, do a lot of business with. We then host a venue where we invite them along with our diverse businesses so that they can develop relationships. So it was my colleague just mentioned about those second tier opportunities. So when they come to the table, when we're putting out the bids, they already know they got to come to the table with a plan of inclusion at that second tier level, whether it's suppliers or other work in place subcontractors. So staying ahead of it really is the main thing, and developing those relationships. So you're not relying on a quote unquote bid list. You're starting just like in our personal lives. right? We have a certain realm of friends that we know, but then we have that closer inner circle, right? So you have those relationships in place. So when something happens, when an RFP comes out unexpectedly, you weren't expecting, you already know, okay, we need to contact these first, at least we know, and then, okay, we'll supplement with the other different types of outreach events and things like that. But it should be an ongoing part of your process.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Simeon. At the Fayetteville Region Airport, we had received bids for the capital project we were going to do, but based upon COVID-19, we had to delay those projects. So I'm giving this to the audience as well. Bids were received, but construction delayed because funding streams were in jeopardy. I think Michael Langer kind of talked to that earlier. The delays in construction translated into increased material cost, and now the contractor is seeking change orders based on delayed construction, which was outside the span of his control. Along with that, once we got started, supply workers may not have been available. So when you had the schedules that we wanted to have there for work to be completed, the schedule was misaligned with the available materials. When I looked at what the University of North Carolina said about change orders, it said changes made to the project after award of the contract are not subject to competitive bidding requirements if the original contract was competitively bid. There is also no limitation on the dollar amount of change order work, but use of change orders should be limited to circumstances that are unforeseen when the contract was awarded. So as we look forward, how do we address all these additional changes after the bid has occurred? And does anybody have any recommendations as to what language we can put into the documents to address that issue? The brain trust is out there and up here, so feel free to speak up. Any attorneys in the house? Yes, sir.
I'm not an attorney, but the question I've got is, what's the threshold for a substantial change in the project due to a change order? If you have a change order that came in and somebody's after it's already bid, and they did a change order, but the change order actually resulted in a substantial change to the original project, don't you have some way to prevent that from happening?
I was looking for that when I researched that particular question, and it said that there is not a constraint, which seems very problematic for me because now my cost could be well above what I originally had proposed or received. Does anybody have a possible answer to that? What are the limits on change orders, if you know of any, after it has been competitively bid? 25%? 25% of the original bid. Do I have a second? So it's no longer a change order. Okay. And I know if we have any engineers in the house, normally some of this will be sent back to the FAA so that they can kind of take a look at it as well to make sure that we're not baiting and switching. Here's what I propose, and now that we're into it, this change order needs to occur because these things are unforeseen. Yes, Mike from Asheville.
Maybe just two quick examples of something that we're going, two different things we're going through right now that might have some relevances. We've got one project that's a traditional design bid build project that's a year behind schedule primarily because of just really lousy weather. It's a ramp expansion project. And our contractor negotiated change orders, which were executed, and was coming back and trying to renegotiate higher prices on change orders he's already signed. Because of all the additional time it's taking. For the most part,
All right, thank you. Anybody else?
Tony?
Yes, sir.
Just from the DBE perspective, if there are change orders, then the DBE goal will apply to those change orders also. So the bidder would need to meet the goal on that additional amount of scope of work. And in addition, they can, if they're committed to using a DBE and there are change orders, they cannot eliminate that work without first consulting the airport.
Okay. Let me make a public service announcement here as well. I was told by the guys in the back that at 2:20, there's supposed to be an emergency management test, and that there are some cell phones that will be affected by that. So at 2:20, if I hear a bunch of phones going off, it's not because you guys don't like the panelists, but it's just one of those things. So just be ready for that. Okay, access to ready, willing, and capable labor is becoming problematic at all levels, from airline pilots to manpower for simple contracts at general aviation and commercial service airports. How can we attract the workforce we so badly need to support our respective businesses? And somebody said, that's too open-ended. Okay.
Yeah.
So Joe, you're a black belt in Six Sigma, and you've got over 25 years of leadership experience. One of the biggest things airport managers face is selecting the most responsive bidders, is the makeup of persons directly involved in the project. Are you able to provide any pointers of what we should be looking for as we evaluate submittals as it relates to the persons on those submittals?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think of it in light of what we're all currently experiencing with the pandemic, with your previous comment, Tony, in reference to supply, demand, manufacturing, trying to find, folks to work projects. And my initial thought is lead time, but how do you build in lead time for a pandemic? From a healthcare standpoint, it's a misnomer, right? We don't know when it's going to happen. There are predictive analytics that are involved as far as looking at the other side of the world. As a matter of fact, we're about to head into flu season. We look over to our Asian culture and our Asian world to see what flus are happening over there, and that is what we use to develop the vaccines for America. Coming this upcoming fall and into our spring time frame. From a supplier or a bidder standpoint, having a similar model to that is rather difficult. I love what was recently just said in reference to developing those relationships, developing that pipeline prior to. That way, when you do have a project that comes on deck, you're staying in contact with your DBE or your MBE folks out there. You're checking on them. You're constantly tapping them, seeing where they are. And that should help, if nothing else, kind of build that predictive or pipeline, if you will. But that's very difficult to manage because it's going to depend upon the project. It's going to depend upon the location. It's going to depend upon access. So that's my best answer for right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll go to Simeon Terry, who's with us virtually. You have worked in the construction industry for over 29 years and managed diversity programs for over 20 years. Your bio says you oversee a mentoring program at Austin Commercial from which over 400 companies have graduated. How does Austin prepare companies for the bidding process, and what changes do you think have occurred as the result of this new COVID-19 environment?
So yes, one of the things that, because in our world, from a commercial construction standpoint, there's a variety of delivery methods. One part of our business, our bridge and roadside, so it's heavy highway, they're pretty much what we call rip and run. They're hard bid, low bid, and that's where you go with. Then you have on the other side of the fence is our vertical construction, where we have anywhere from CM at risk delivery methods, design build, design bid build, and then even some cases hard bid. So what we do is, again, we in our mentor protege program, we have about 12 different workshops that we focus on. And one of them is in the meeting with our pre-construction team and going through the various delivery methods. And so they clearly understand, the differences. You'd be amazed sometimes that some of the contractors that really don't understand the differences in the delivery methods and therefore exclude themselves or price themselves out. One of the things is we really hone in on what are the key elements that you need to make sure that you're including your bid, your inclusions, clarifying certain things. I mean, really just some of the basics is really what, oftentimes is overlooked. Pricing is always a big thing as far as materials goes and things like that. So, we encourage them to stay abreast continuously within the marketplace. One of the things that we were able to do as the pandemic hit, and then obviously material prices started to rise, again, having those relationships in place with several of our, particularly DBE firms that we have relationships with, we went to and talked with some of these suppliers and negotiated various terms where we could get a little bit better pricing. In some cases, we converted those contracts if they were already solidified after the pricing increases. Some of them, in some cases, we converted those to labor only, where we then absorbed the material costs or were able to lessen the cost because of our buying power or long-term relationship with some of those suppliers. And again, it's been an ongoing venue even to now. And so I think, again, as I said early on, having those relationships in place allows you to be a little bit more strategic and a little bit more proactive than reactive. And it's going to continue for a while. Really making sure that with our, CM at risk type of projects, delivery methods, the negotiating starts much early on. And again, prices obviously is a key, but again, sometimes some other factors go into awards of those. So overall best value, which a lot of times is we're working on right now about 9 different airport campuses. Everybody's a little bit different, but for the most part, they are, for our contracts, are kind of overall most competitive, but best value. So that gives a little bit of wiggle room versus just a straight hard bid, rip and run, low dollar win. So, but it's an ongoing challenge that we're going to continue to have, and we have to continuously be mindful and strategic in our approach.
Okay, thank you, Simeon. Who in the audience has a project that's being bid right now? There are no projects being bid, or nobody wants to raise their hand? Okay. So you just had a project bid. Were there any impacts on the way you bid that project based upon the new environment that we're in? And he's bringing you the mic because the people in the virtual world said that they wanted to hear the people in the audience speaking. And so he's going to hold it for you versus pass.
Okay, so we were skeptical or we were cautious when we put this bid out, and it was for vertical construction. It wasn't a normal pavement project, but we were pleasantly surprised with how many bidders that we had. We had 7 qualified bidders for this project, but the inflation right now, we had to reduce the time on contract to 30 days is all they would guarantee because of these price escalations for material, in this case the vertical, a little bit more sensitive to it, especially steel in a building. So that was the only accommodation that I think we really made for the current times, was shortening the time on bid or time to contract to 30 days. And when I talked to Tommy up at the ADO, he said he's seeing that across the board.
Okay, so you talked about the escalating cost of materials as well as the length of the project?
Well, yeah, the length. So we went into 2 periods. So we have a procurement period that's going to go 120 days or 180 days, and we are not going to even issue the notice to proceed to construction until we get some better fidelity on the procurement period. We're hoping it'll be less than 180 days, but we've split it into 2 phases for that project specifically because of the supply chain.
Okay, I know at our airport, one of the reasons that I proceeded with the construction project that was planned was because we were entering into the COVID-19 environment. I thought, based upon the fact that we had fewer passengers, that we'd be able to expedite the construction process. But what happened was trying to expedite the construction process when people are not actually working on their jobs, but rather at home, impacted not only the supply chain, but is the same thing with the people who had committed to come and work at the airport. The manpower is simply not there. Is anybody else seeing any of those things at their airports? And who else is bidding? Anybody else bidding a project that wants to be brave enough to tell us about it? Yes. Moore County.
So we just bid a project which includes 2 hangars, total of 17 aircraft, some T's and some boxes, if you will. And we did the same project back in 2008. In 2008, the project cost $1.8 million. We estimated 2.3, and it actually came in at 4.3, had 1 bidder, and that was it, just 1 single bidder at 4.3 million. And I can't afford to charge enough to pay a loan like that.
The return on the investment.
Exactly right. And so we're kind of stuck until the cost of steel goes down and we find other bidders that are willing to bid the project.
Similar situation at our airport. We bid the project pre-COVID. It came in at $1 million plus. We said, let's rebid this. And of course, I had to add a lot of additional monies through city council action to make sure that when these bids come in, that we can at least have enough money to pay the persons we'd like to build the hangars. Anybody else? How would you change your bidding process in this new environment? How would you attract bidders in this new environment? How would you attract bidders at all? Let's throw that out there. Because I can tell you there are a lot of people who are so tired of hearing COVID-19.
Yes.
They're just so tired of hearing it. And I could tell you, just in the room, people are tired of wearing masks, they're tired of doing a lot of those things. But the bottom line is, it's here with us. And given the fact that we've got the new variant coming on board, I think it's going to impact the significant infrastructure needs that we have at North Carolina airports. And those things have to be done. But even if we got the funding, if you don't have the manpower to support that, we still have an issue.
Toney, to your how do you attract bidders, we did do some of what was discussed more. We did more legwork up front. So socialize it through the architecture firm, through the engineering firm, and put out more feelers and let people know, even before the formal bid documents were out, that we were preparing to do this. And again, we had 7 bidders. There was some, not to the degree Scott talked about, escalation. Our engineering estimate just from 3 months prior to the time we bid it went up about 20%. So they were kind of keyed into some of this, but then our bid range was 1.9 to 2.9 between those 7 bidders. So pretty wide range. So we got a lot in, but and that was, you know, firms from Charlotte all the way back over to the coast, and that's probably where you saw some of that range as well. So it's geographic, I'm sure, to a degree.
Is there anybody here from NCDOT that could talk about bidding at that level and what they're seeing? NCDOT. I'm not with NCDOT right now. Okay, go ahead. He's up here. Yes, sir.
Come. I needed this exercise after lunch.
A sense of urgency. I like that.
Wow.
Yeah, so not unlike this industry, we're seeing the same situations.
For a long time, I think everybody knows we had some budgetary issues, so we had a lot of really competitive bids coming out of the pandemic, but recently we've seen pretty significant price increases. We're hearing a lot from our suppliers, obviously guardrail contracts or anything else that has steel, bridge girders, things like that are really being impacted. So we're trying to figure out how we can include some sort of cost indexing into our contracts. Hadn't worked that out yet, but we're still looking at it. So yeah, very similar to what we're seeing here. Yeah.
Okay. The fact that you mentioned cost indexing inside of your contracts is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, is how do we start putting language in the documents that help us address the issues like this that may come up? Hopefully it's once in a lifetime, but it's the same thing I said a few years ago when I said we're never going to have another hurricane like that. And right behind it, we got another hurricane. It's the very thing that you don't anticipate that will happen. Okay, at this juncture, I'm going to go and have Wilfred Nixon do his presentation, and then we'll come back and close out.
Okay. Good evening. You see Wilfred Nixon from Ken Weeden and Associates. As you see, we have the National DBE Training Institute. That's a division, our training division that we train DBE administrators on the DBE program. So we adapted part of our presentation for the outreach part of our training for today. So public participation, now after the pandemic, we go more virtual. Now we're kind of opening back up and doing more in person. But there were some benefits to virtual. Although they're not as interactive, it does allow for more participation. So maybe in the future there'd be more need for at least some meetings to continue to be virtual. So public participation beyond DBE goal setting. This is one of the most often neglected parts of airports' DBE programs, is the actually outreach to DBEs. We often hear DBEs complain that they didn't know about the project. So outreach helps to alleviate some of those issues with awareness of upcoming projects. And we developed this concept called NEAR. So NEAR, N is notification. So make sure that your DBEs, and also all small businesses and your primes, they know about your projects that are coming up through all usual methods of solicitation. Education and training. You want to train your DBE community and give them information of the opportunities of being in the DBE program. Awareness, airports and organizations, make yourself aware of resources in the community. So there may be some training opportunities that you can utilize for your DBEs in your community, such as small business development centers, NCDOT, BOWD programs. So make yourself aware of programs that are available. And also recruitment. Always seek to expand your DBE pool. So anytime you have an opportunity to meet with DBEs and assist them with certification, you want to do that and increase your DBE pool. Some potential sources for DBE outreach. If you have a federally funded project, then you have DBE regulations. So you have to use the North Carolina UCP DBE directory to count for participation. So that's one source. North Carolina Hub directory, that's for state funded projects. So hubs won't necessarily count toward your DBE participation, but they're a good source for other projects. Minority contractors, so NC Minority Contractors Association and Metro Atlanta Contractors Association, those are some other outlets. Also, there's some national DBE or directories, and one is the FAA Matchmaker System. So the Matchmaker System has a searchable database for the entire United States. So every state is basically, they collected DBE directories for all 50 states in one source. Also, there are links to airports and some of their goals are on the site. There are 5,000 airports and 40,000 DBEs and ACDBs represented in the matchmaker system. And also, you can also publish your opportunities on the FAA matchmaker system. So we have a link there if you can see it, but you can contact us if you need a link. In general, all airports, when you receive federal funds, you're required to set DBE goals. So as part of that goal setting process, you must consult with stakeholders prior to submitting your overall goal to the FAA. And the consultation must include direct interactive consultation with your stakeholders. So your prime contractors, small businesses, DBE businesses, organizations in your market area, anyone that has access to your DBE program or can provide input into your goal setting process. And these meetings can be face-to-face or they can be virtual. So any virtual platforms, Adobe Connect, GoToWebinar, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, those can get utilized for your consultation. Also, part of your goal setting, when your goals are set, you must publish a notice of your goal on your website. So that's a notice allowing the community to come view your goal for a 30-day review and comment period, if applicable. In your public consultation, I mentioned earlier, you're reaching out to your community groups, SBDCs, Chamber of Commerce, small businesses, not just DBEs, but all small businesses, and ACDBEs and operators of similar programs. So you may have a state or local MBE program director that may help you provide input into your process. So that's an overview of some outreach for the DBE programs. And any questions, and we'll turn it back over to Toney.
Any questions? It must be after lunch. Lord have mercy.
Back here, Tony.
All righty.
On the vertical side, at one point in time, DOT was looking at being more flexible on the DBE certification process for subs to be able to maybe be on an NC hub basis or something else other than DOT, because a lot of drywall contractors, for example, or plumbers, don't want to spend the time and effort to get DOT certified when they're never again going to work for the DOT other than in vertical, hangar, terminal, that kind of thing. Has any progress been made on that? Do y'all know?
I got a negative head nod from somewhere over here. Okay, I do have a question back there. It looks like the second in command at NCDOT is ready to respond.
There are a couple of things underway as far as that goes, especially for GA airports. The other thing I want to say when we're talking about minority participation is DBE only applies when it's federal funds. You must have $1 of federal funds. A lot of the funding that's coming out to airports in North Carolina right now are state funds. So you've also got to be considering an MBE, WBE program. And then the other piece to that is just because they are shown as a qualified minority company, they still have to be registered as a pre-qualified vendor to do business in North Carolina. It's a dual certification. It's not just one. So please make sure that when you're bidding and putting these projects out that you're getting both. So they have to be certified as a minority contractor, but they also have to be pre-qualified to do work in North Carolina.
And can you give your name and title, please?
Rachel Bingham, Deputy Director with the Division of Aviation.
Thank you, Rachel. Any other questions? I was about to say, is everybody right? No. Okay, go ahead.
So I didn't catch neighbor, our general contractor panelists that are mentioned construction management as a delivery method and design build as a delivery method. That can be another way, again, vertically, for y'all to look at getting different types of participation from your generals is in the design build direction, similar to the CM bases that somebody over here had mentioned. Many times, some contractors are very much more interested in being a part of the whole solution, not just providing an end user service. So that can bring in, and if you wanted to change some of your goals or have other things along that line, they can also bring in specific minority subcontractors to help in that process as well. So it's a very different delivery method that is still state approved and able to be done. Can be done even with FAA money. A little bit more interesting if you go about it that way, but definitely can be done with just state money.
I'm going to bring Simeon back in.
Thank you very much for that. And I guess there's a question about whether you want to bring Simeon back in, if he has something to say. Go ahead, Simeon. Did you have a comment?
Oh, no. I'm good.
Okay, sounds like a setup there. I appreciate you, Wilfred. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I feel like a preacher. It says, you know what, when you've said all you can say the benediction. All right, the one thing that I want to do at this juncture, unless there are other comments, is remind you not to forget to check the silent auction bids and to visit the exhibit hall and spend some time with exhibitors during the scheduled breaks. Also, if you take the time to help me thank my panelists, both Simeon Terry, who's on the line, and the two that are on the podium with me here. I know it's after lunch, but I was also asked to tell you that ice cream is available on this break. So please participate. Have a good evening.
I love it.